Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Megan, and I have done NaNoWriMo 10 times. So this November will be my 11th NaNoWriMo project, and I have done this for 10 years. I have done NaNoWriMo every year since 2007. So what I originally wanted to do was go through each of my past NaNoWriMos and read them aloud. That was my original goal. That was my plan, and split it up into a couple of videos. That was a horrible idea. It mostly involved like 3 hours of footage of me squinting at my screen like this, reading, and just, it wasn't great. So instead, I'm going to go over all my NaNoWriMos, share each and every one of them with you, and a little bit about them, and maybe a line or two, and call that a NaNoWriMo retrospective. That is probably enough of my past NaNoWriMos to satisfy anyone. My NaNoWriMo username is Taffy Pearls. I will leave it linked down below. If you want to add me as a buddy, just let me know and I will add you back. Since we do have 10 years of NaNoWriMos to go through, let's get to it, shall we? 2007. November 2007, I was a sophomore in high school. It was the only NaNoWriMo I did in high school. The following January is when I no longer went to high school. So it was the only NaNoWriMo I've done during school. It was about 15,000-ish words. I don't actually have the full document of it, but I posted it on fictionpress.com, and that is where I've pulled it from, the 3 chapters. The 4th chapter, however much of there it was, has been lost to the sands of time, and frankly, it belongs there. The sands of time can keep it. This is definitely the worst NaNoWriMo I've ever done, because it was the first. It was called The Rising of the Beasts, Book 1, The King's Mage. I'm not sure why. I had a lot of ideas, I think, and of course none of them panned out. It's also the only NaNoWriMo I ever wrote by hand, and then I transferred to the computer. Let's see. Chapter 1, Damar's Manor, the town of Carsley, of the holding of Damar's, part of the kingdom of Rivand, as ruled by King Harson and Queen Alicia in the year 25 year of their reign, was home to 2 girls, their father, and their father's new wife. That was 1 sentence. It was also 1 paragraph. I did a lot of run-on sentences. My sentences, even now, honestly, I have a problem with run-on sentences. I go off on tangents, and my sentences just never end. Yes, so let's skip all the way to the end, because frankly, we don't need to talk that much about this one. This story, it's mostly about a girl named Alyssa, I think her name is, and she's like 16, and she has a stepmother who is a witch. There's a boy that was turned into a crow. At the end, I introduce a prince who tries to kill himself. So there was a lot going on, and not all of it good. 2008 was my first NaNoWriMo win. It was the first year I was also not in school, even though I was only 16. My description that I have on NaNoWriMo is, I think even the characters themselves wanted to escape into better stories. First it was about time travel, and then some other weird shit happened, which kind of sums it up. Follows a girl named Natalia, who was originally named Tallulah, who travels back in time like 1,000 years, and it doesn't cause as many problems as you think it would. Some other characters time travel after that, and then there's some shadow monsters, and maybe some elves, apparently. I basically threw everything in, including the kitchen sink. So let's read the first couple of lines of this one. NaNoWriMo 2008. Chapter 1. For feck's sake, Natalia, wake up! You've been asleep all bloody morning! Blearily, Natalia slowly opened her eyes, wincing as her cramped muscles grumbled in protest to the sudden movement. She grumbled, a bit unwilling to awaken. Had she really fallen asleep at the kitchen table last night? Last she had checked, she had been steadily reading away by candlelight. A brief glance told her that the candle had completely burned away while she slept. And now suddenly the sun was shining brightly through the windows, and the kitchen was bustling with servants working to prepare the banquet that the new lord was holding this evening. In fact, I think there's several NaNoWriMos that I started with the main character first waking up. This is the only one I've read recently, and I read quite a bit of it, and it was honestly a lot. So we're gonna skip all the way to the end. The end of this has completely different characters. Let's see. Tainted, unnatural, a creature of darkness. It was near unbelievable. Mara wasn't sure she could really believe it. George was so nice. He didn't look like the evil sort, none whatsoever. As far as Mara had ever known, George didn't have a bad bone in his entire body, and all the tales of the tainted ones said that they were unnatural humans who praised dark gods and sacrificed their young and puppies and things, and then spilled the blood in their crops. George did not look like the sort to do that. Well, I guess George is secretly an asshole. No idea who George is. Or Mara, for that matter, but some dragons in this, too? Wow. Jeez, just everything was happening here. Just everything. And that's sort of a theme I have, because I have always, in the past, I was always a pantser. I would just write whatever came to mind, no matter whether it fit or not. Just whatever I felt like, and I get bored pretty easily, so there was a lot of random crap. And this is why I've tried to become more of a planner, more of an outliner. But okay, so that was 2008, where I wrote 50,011 words. 2009, my description for this one is elves were involved. Elves were involved. This one came to 50,247 words. Oh yes, I remember. I started for like 5,000 words, I was writing a sci-fi novel. So it's like chapter 1. The walkway that Celia had chosen to take a walk on this afternoon was probably a bad choice, considering that it ran along the outer ring, right against the railing that looked over the lower city on Terai. A bad choice considering her fear of heights. It was a silly fear since she knew that there was an energy barrier along the railing and sensors that would indicate if anyone was about to go over it. Of course, the walkway was plenty wide enough that Celia was far enough away from the edge that she was perfectly safe. She ends up imprisoned, like there's chapter 1, chapter 2. Oh, and then here we have where I switch stories. And it's chapter 1. Lily awoke from her sleep in a dream quite suddenly, sitting up with a jolt. She looked around her but saw nothing but her room. Yet what else would she see? Nothing else, because the dream she had just had was completely false and would henceforth denied to having existed. Because it didn't. Dream? What dream? Never happened. That was my way of segueing from one story to another. And it has another character waking up. Anyway, this is more of a fantasy. There's some sort of academy. I honestly have no idea what's going on. So let's go all the way to the bottom, because I think there was a dwarf. Oh, there's halflings as well. So at some point, I must have watched Lord of the Rings. This one, it was also very kitchen sinky. There was some traveling a lot. There was a lot of traveling, I remember that. I also used, like, bloody hell a lot back then, because I was a little obsessed with Harry Potter, maybe. Moving on to 2010, I wrote Feyring, which was 50,223 words, another fantasy. It started out as a here, take my MacGuffin, and turned into ridiculousness supposedly to do with fairies. That is about all I remember from it as well. I know it got super weird. That is pretty much the trend with all of my NaNoWriMos, is they start out a little weird, and then they just get weirder from there. Setting the bouquet of flowers on the gravesite, pressing them against the soft grass, just so, Catress Sarah completed her weekly ceremony at her brother's grave. She sat back on her heels, staring at the gravestone. Ileroy Sarah, 153 to 165. It was a plain headstone, much like all the other simple slabs of rock that littered the cemetery, and where there wasn't slabs of rock, there were wooden stakes that made Rory's stone look incredibly ornate in comparison. For such a small town, one might expect a smaller cemetery, but it seemed to Catress that people just seemed to come to the village of Aubury as if it were a mouse trap, and they the mice. Probably didn't help that Bury was right in the name, Catress had always thought. And then her parents blamed her for her brother's death, and then I think she gets a dead guy's ring or something, and then she, like, does a bunch of traveling. There's always traveling. I need to reread this eventually, but I don't feel like... Oh, there's a giant spider at some point. Or a person that was turned into a giant spider. So let's move on to 2011. It was fan fiction year, I guess, and I didn't even do 50,000 words. I got 47,397 words. Oh, it's a whole mess of crap. The first thing that I wrote, actually it has a bunch of stuff. Not all of it is fan fiction. It's a whole bunch of crap, actually, like little bits of stories. But it starts out with the Vampire Diaries and the Secret Circle in the Hunger Games universe. Roll on past that was dystopia. After I got tired of writing fantasy, I've tried writing dystopia, but I don't think I'm ever gonna manage it at this point. An idea of, this was an alien who lived among humans as like a spy, and then the aliens reveal themselves, and she super isn't thrilled about it, because now she has to tell her wife about it. Ooh, a wanted poster. Oh, I think this was a Snow White retelling, where she was wanted by the Queen. This was before Once Upon a Time. Was it? No, it wasn't. One of my favorite ongoing eventual stories is A Witch Hunter Goes to Witch Camp. No, A Witch Goes to Witch Hunter Camp. That's what I meant to say. And it's these two twins, and this was inspired by the show on ABC Family a few years ago. I want to say it's called The Lion Game, maybe? And it was two twins who find each other through the internet, but in this case one is a witch and one is not, and the one who is a witch comes to live with their birth family but has to pretend to be the other twin, and she ends up going to witch hunter camp because that's what her twin does, apparently. That one is one that I really want to write eventually. Over the years, I feel like my writing kind of went down and then went back up maybe a little bit, and then maybe went back down again. Sometimes I read old writing and think and almost think it sounds better than my writing now, and then I'm like, what the shit? But I don't know, maybe that's just distance from your writing. So let's move on to 2012. I wrote Cursed, which was 50,495 words, and it was YA middle grade-ish fantasy. When their city is under a curse that acts up every so many years, two children take it upon themselves to figure out the mystery, but time travel and magic intervene and they find much more than they bargained for. Now, the characters in this were based on role-play characters of me and my friend, but they were also Harry Potter characters. Teddy Lupin and Victoire Weasley from Harry Potter, so it's Harry Potter characters, but not really. And, well, some of their parents get mentioned, and I just sort of changed the names and went with it. So 2012 Megan was a mess. Okay, Chapter 1, scene number 1. Theodore Wolfhart woke up at dawn every single morning, awoken by his grandmother. But one day, it was not the call of breakfast or an annoyed shout that forced him from sleep. It was a loud banging at the front door. At first, Theo was certain the noise was coming from inside his dream, from the sheep he had been discussing alchemy with, but as he slowly became conscious, he realized that was absurd. Dragging himself from the comfort of his bed and blankets, he trudged to the front door. Bang, 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 the noise was insufferable. "Just a minute," he called, wondering groggily why Grams wasn't answering the door. Theo slid back the peep slat in the door, peering out into what appeared to be a very bright morning. There wasn't a person in sight from the slat until a face leapt up into view with blue eyes and wild strawberry blonde hair just visible. Violet West, 11 years old and Theo's closest friend. "Theo, open up!" she shouted tersely. What is Violet doing awake so early, Theo thought, because surely it must be pre-dawn. Grams usually made sure he was awake by dawn, but Violet never seemed to be awake quite so early. He unlocked all 7 locks that they kept on their door, not to discourage thieves, as Grams always said, but to ward off a worse nuisance, she never said what, and swung open the door. Now, my 2012 NaNoWriMo was one that I was always kind of proud of and wanted to continue, but at the same time, it wasn't that good either. It gets kind of ridiculous pretty quickly with more time travel. I do love time travel. It would have probably been a better idea if I hadn't based it off of Harry Potter characters. Maybe. Just maybe. Was 2012 the last time I've won? Yes, 2012 was the last time I won NaNoWriMo. So on to 2013, called Spell Discord, and it was 38,055 words, and it was young adult fantasy, is apparently what I labeled it at, and the synopsis was, it begins when one girl wants to find her sister, a man wants to find his son, another man wants to find his fiancée, a girl who's been dead 275 years, and a boy who wants to prove he's an adult. And then stuff happens, because stuff always happens. A tale of a broken realm that challenges the laws of nature itself, a realm where the dead turn to stone, and 7 worlds come together to make one, a realm where 2 types of magic have been at war for centuries. There's a good chunk of it that is ripped off of Final Fantasy XIII. Specifically, the characters are ripped off of Final Fantasy XIII very literally and very much on purpose. Like, entirely on purpose. It seemed like a great idea at the time, but in retrospect, it wasn't a great idea. I'm not sure why I did that. It's Part 1. Now, stay off that leg or you'll reopen the wound. Rosalie patted the 6-year-old girl on the head lightly. "Thank you, Miss Rosalie." Another boy helped the girl off the work table Rosalie had used to put the kid's leg in a splint. They hobbled off to another area of the building, probably to disobey her orders. The house was a big, formerly abandoned building tucked away into a corner near the market district. It wasn't as in shambles as one might expect for a building filled with kids who otherwise lived on the streets. It was a tidy, huge place, with even an area for Rosalie or any other medic to examine the kids' wounds and health. Rosalie washed her hands in the sink as she called out, "All right, who's ever next, come on in." She used her wrists to push her dark brown hair behind her ears with a huff. The curtain covering the doorway behind her rustled, and she turned, expecting another kid who'd fallen off a roof or gotten cut by brambles. Instead, she saw 2 Peace City guardsmen. Her heart paused for a breath, surprised. They were tall, armored in sleek, silvery metal, with sheathed swords at their side and pulse guns on the other. Dun dun dun. And Rosalie is Sarah Farron, basically, because her sister is based off Lightning Farron. They decided it was best to begin before dawn rather than now. Stryker seemed reluctant to go to bed without having yet saved Rosalie, but Ralph reminded him that he was useless to her with no sleep. Elspeth took first watch, still examining her new toy. Will went to sleep to the sound of Ava muttering in her sleep across the room, thoughts swirling in his head of how he might prove he was a grown-up too. He would just have to show them that he could handle anything they could. That's how I ended. Will was basically Hope, Ava was Vanille, Ralph was Saz, I think his name is, and then Stryker was, of course, Snow. What a mess. That was 2012, or 2013, that was 2013. Now we're on to 2014. Now, 2014 was a rough year for me in general. Just in general, it was a really, really rough year. 2014, I wrote Divine, and also worked on the Sky Roads, I think. But Divine was my NaNoWriMo story, and it was 12,650 words, and it was YA fantasy. And the description for it is, "Stuff happens. Ooh, ah. Lacey wants nothing more than to be the strongest wizard in all of Arius. No simple task, given that the current strongest is Zaber Zelen, a mysterious wizard with 11 keys to his name. No one has reached that many key ranks in nearly a century, and it was Saber that took down the last few wizards that had it. Lacey is a satisfactory rank 5, but that's a paltry average in comparison. There's only one way to improve her skills, and that's an apprenticeship in the city of Ebon Reach, the hub for talented wizards across the country. But she doesn't expect an apprenticeship with Zaber Zelen's own protege, Ariva Bleeth, a rank 9 wizardess and a member of the Arius Council. Gideon is Ariva's other apprentice, a rank 6 wizard tasked with a huge project. Find the source of what's destroying magical energy. Everyone knows that the magical energy in Arius is finite, but it's not supposed to be decreasing so rapidly. Together, Lacey, Gideon, along with Lacey's cousin Julian and a healing apprentice, Deline, go to do the thing, hell yeah. That's the summary. That's the synopsis for Divine. And I was very passionate about Divine, let me tell you. I got the idea of key ranks for wizards from Fairy Tale. Then I thought too hard about it, so it got weird. Like, not actually in the story, but in my head it got weird. Do you ever have this problem? Does anyone else have this problem? Where when you've thought about a story a lot and you sort of start thinking, like, it gets weirder and weirder and then kind of turns into fan fiction and sort of just not what it should be. It kind of gets strange, like you would see in a fan fiction. Does anyone else have this problem? Is it just me? I feel like it just might be me, because at some point I decided that, well, from the beginning, Gideon was supposed to actually be this Zaber Zelen guy, and he just happens to be immortal and disguised himself as his own protege's apprentice, which is fair enough, that's not too weird. But then it gets weirder, because then I decided that at some point Lacey would travel back 1,000 years or whatever, a couple hundred years, something like that, and she would train Zaber Zelen to be a wizard, and they would fall in love, and I think that Ariva was going to end up being their daughter, which is kind of weird, because she is teaching Lacey, and she's like an older woman, and it got weird. That was weird. And also, Julian, Lacey's cousin, was undead, which I still found really fascinating, and he was going to fall in love with Eileen, but Eileen didn't come off on paper as she was supposed to be. You ever have that with a character? Like, you like a character a lot and they're supposed to act a certain way, but then when you're writing them, somehow they act not like that, and you don't understand why. Like, it's like the words don't match what you want from them, and it's like, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what's supposed to be happening. Okay, Divine, Chapter 1. All Lacey could think was, they won't let me through the gates. They'll take away my keys and tell me I'm not a good enough wizard. These were foolish thoughts, she knew that. She had earned the 5 keys on her belt one by one, and the city would have it on file. And of course, it wasn't like they didn't allow non-wizards in. They let anyone in who wasn't a criminal or exiled. That made her wonder if you could be exiled adjacent. That was silly, though, right? She felt a gentle shove from behind, startling her to walk towards the guard station at the gate. Julian was behind her, likely wanting her to just hurry up and move. It was still so weird having him back after so long. The guard at the station was a bored, portly man with 3 keys on his shoulder. Only 3? Wouldn't they rather have more skilled wizards watching the only entrance to the capital city? What if an actual criminal appeared? Lacey waved her hand over the blue light emanating from the podium. The words Lacey Million, 5 keys appeared in the air in front of her, glimmering blue, complete with projections of each of her keys. She always wondered how that worked. "What is your business in Ebon Reach today?" the guard said, as if he'd asked it 500 times today, and he probably had, judging from the crowd at the gate. "To become the strongest wizard in all of Arius," she found herself saying without thinking. The guard nodded with a bored look, and as her name vanished, he waved her on. Next! Beyond the guard station stood the giant gates into Ebon Reach. The gates were upwards of 50 feet, wrought from wood and dark steel. To each side stood the twin dragons. They weren't real, of course. Dragons had been extinct for such a long time, some wondered if they'd existed at all. But the way their silver scales shimmered in the sunlight made them seem so lifelike. "What is your business in Ebon Reach today?" the guard asked Julian a few feet behind her. Undead sidekick to the blonde. A moment later, he appeared at her side. Her cousin was a tall, striking young man, with dark hair that flitted into his eyes in that lazy way that made girls gush over him. Or had, before, not so much anymore. Those same eyes that had once held so much life seemed dull, dead. He shouldn't call himself her sidekick, that wasn't right. Though I still really like this story, and them, and stuff, and someday, maybe I'll complete it. Oh, here's the Sky Roads. Oh, this was the Sky Roads. Oh my gosh, it was one of the stories that I was co-writing with my friend Lucy that we have not finished, and possibly never will. Maybe we will, but Sky Roads was one that involved, there were Sky Roads, and it was like in letter format, and maybe if you're lucky someday we will actually finish those. I'm not sure. Maybe I should rewrite my parts, because I am the worst writer between me and my friend Lucy. I am not as good a writer as she is. She writes like gold comes out of her fingertips. I write like nothing comes out of my fingertips. To Miss Bethany Kerr aboard the Trader's Charity. From Miss Grace Fenton aboard the Noble Janet. Darling Beth, words cannot express how happy I am to hear from you. It's been so long. I thought I'd never hear from you again, especially after no response to my letters. I've been sending missives for months, like Jimmy told you. Wow, for once something out of his mouth wasn't pure shit. Get the boy a medal. Kerrigan must have been holding them back, the ratty old bitch. I admit I worried that you just didn't want to speak to me after I left, but I kept trying. Don't worry, you weren't missing out on much. So Grace and Beth were these orphans. Grace was adopted. Oh, I think I have some, a dystopia here. All fall down. Chapter 1. Some mornings Katie wondered what real sunlight felt like as the artificial light panels came to life outside her bedroom window. She imagined it was warm and bright, crossing the landscape of Earth as it turned. Imagining the landscape of her planet was harder. She'd seen pictures of trees, deserts, rivers, and mountains, but building them in her mind was hard. It was like trying to dream up a new color. Her brain just couldn't process it. Even in the greenhouses, things were neat and clean, with the gardens closely tended for maximum production. She doubted the planet above was like that, especially since there were no people to keep it orderly. Every morning at 6 a.m., the light panels in the atrium and corridors lit up all at once. They never went completely dark, of course. There were people with night shifts for their work or guards that needed to see. During the 21 to 6 nighttime, the panels still gave off a soft glow. Katie liked to use it as a nightlight sometimes. That is 2014 for you. Little bit all over the place. Little bit all over the place. Let's move on to 2015, just 2 years ago. where I didn't do very well. Went from 2013 and then downwards. 2015, I wrote The Starlit Mere, 15,631 words. So I definitely failed that one. A princess tired of the life of luxury, of balls and gowns and gardens, runs away from her father's palace in seek of adventure. Along the way, she meets an innkeeper's daughter who accompanies her on a quest to retrieve the mystical Mirror of Stars and find trouble instead. The princess and the innkeeper's daughter were of course going to fall in love, but I never finished it. This is one that I would like to finish someday as well, because I did like what I did write. NaNoWriMo, The Starlit Mere, Chapter 1. It was during the spring ball that Princess Marcella decided she was going to run away. Dressed in flowers from head to toe, being spun around by the skeeviest of lords who still held out some vain hope that her father would see reason and marry her off to one of them, surrounded by shimmering lights and lilting music. She had had enough of it. King Theobram took any opportunity to throw a ball, even though he never came down from his throne at the far end of the room for a single one. Beginning of spring, ball. Ambassador from a southern nation, ball. Prince Carrick figured out which end of the sword was the savvy part, ball. Perhaps it was because his late queen had enjoyed them so much, or maybe it was simply to drive Marcella mad. The young princess wasn't quite sure, so that was 2015. Oh, that is the one that I did, I was going to do a NaNoWriMo vlog during, and I did do a week 1 vlog, which I will link down below just for the heck of it, even though I haven't watched that video in a while and it's probably awful, but if you want to see it, it will be down below in the description box. So finally, we come to 2016, last year. 2016, I began Your Royal Witchness. It was 4,801 words, my biggest failure to date. And the description is, a witch wants to be a princess, holla. Holla. That was the synopsis that I put. This is another one that I really do like the idea of, and would like to continue. NaNoWriMo 2016, Chapter 1. Never go to the village, for that is where the foolish mortals live. Stay off the roads, for that is where the troublesome mortals pass. If you see one, run away. Elodie's mother would have turned her into a frog for at least a week if she knew that her youngest had dared to venture to the village by herself and in disguise. Neither of her elder siblings would dare such a thing, not for anything. They listened to Mother, obeying her rules and following traditions. But Elodie couldn't help it. She loved to go to the village and see how the mortals lived. Today was market day, the streets bustling below the balcony railing Elodie had situated herself on. Vendors and village folk bartered and bargained for food, for spices, for fabric, for all sorts of amazing things that not even a witch's magic could brew. The vendor's stall beneath her sold clothes, dresses that were plain, and dresses that were surprisingly ornate for being made without magic needle and threads. Those clothes won't last the snowfall. Eustace, her brother, had said one time that Elodie had convinced him to come. Their thread is too weak, a knife would cut it easily, and it gets so dirty, useless. He hadn't seen the wonder that Elodie had. See that the mortals lived just fine without the magics the four of them could never do without. So it was the idea that this young witch named Elodie, she lives with her 2 older siblings and her mother in the middle of the forest, and they they never come out of the forest, they never leave, and Elodie wishes that she could go do other stuff, and then when her mother goes missing or doesn't come back from the city, I think she was planning on going there. I never got that far, though. I wish that I had. Someday, I hope I will. Finally, I think we're done, and those are just the November NaNoWriMos. That doesn't include the camp NaNoWriMos I did. That's a whole other crappy video someday, let me tell you. NaNoWriMo 2017 is next month. I am pumped. I'm super excited. I am always excited for NaNoWriMo. I don't know why. I can write without NaNoWriMo if I put my mind to it, but I just love NaNoWriMo. I love the idea of putting in how much I've done and keeping progress and showing off my progress on an online something. That completes this NaNoWriMo retrospective for sure. I do plan to do a couple of NaNoWriMo planning videos this month. I plan to do 4 of them for ideas, characters, settings, and outlining. I will have those 4 videos up this month, and next month I plan to do a vlog every day for NaNoWriMo next month. It's to force myself to write every day or risk posting an extra crappy video. Hopefully NaNoWriMo 2017 is a comeback. Big win, since I haven't apparently won NaNoWriMo for 5 years. This shirt has cat ears. You can't even see the cat ears. I feel like 2007 me would have really appreciated this shirt. what am I saying? 2017 me loves the shirt. Look at it. It's so cute. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about my writing past, because I, for some reason, enjoyed telling it. So, thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.